You are 20 years in with no stripes on your sleeve. The man giving you orders has 2. The academy pays $63,636. The top of this schedule pays $156,564. There are 2 ladders in this job and they do not line up. One decides who gives orders. The other decides who gets paid. A detective who has worked cases for 20 years can be outranked by a sergeant promoted last spring and out-earn him the whole time. This is every level of a police officer's career and what it costs to climb. If you want to see how these jobs really pay, subscribe so you do not miss the next one. We start at level 1, the police recruit. The police recruit earns $30.59 an hour, roughly $63,636 a year. Most of them are 21 to 28. You are paid to be a student. 6 months of law, defensive tactics, driving, firearms, and scenario rooms. You wear a uniform that has no authority attached to it yet. Week 9, you clear a scenario room and put your hand on the door frame with your weapon still pointed inward. An instructor stops everything. He never mentions the door. He talks about the muzzle for the rest of the class. Getting in requires a clean background investigation, a written exam, and a medical and psychological screening. Most who apply never reach a classroom, and the reason is usually time. One large department reported an average of 349 days from application to hire. Here is what nobody tells you. The screening is not the narrow part. The waiting is. Departments lose applicants to other jobs while the files sit in a queue. Nobody has given you an order in front of a stranger yet. The funnel here does not look like other trades, because almost all of the loss happens before training starts. One large department logged more than 13,000 applications in a single year and completed about 7,500 written tests from them, while its academy could start roughly 650 people a year. Attrition inside that academy ran under 15%. Compare a state police academy in Massachusetts, where one recruit class lost 46% of its members, and a commanding officer told reporters a normal class loses a quarter to a third. Same country, same year, 2 different numbers, because one academy is a college course with a fitness test, and the other is a residential program running 16 hours a day that takes most of its casualties in the first fortnight. When somebody quotes a washout rate for policing, ask which kind of academy they mean. The probationary police officer earns $43.66 an hour, roughly $90,816 a year. Most of them are 22 to 30. You are in a car with a training officer who writes an evaluation on you every shift. Somewhere in the first 6 months, you take a report from someone who is lying to you, and you write it down anyway, because your job is the report. Your 4th month, you clear a domestic call because both parties say it is fine. Your training officer sends you back to separate them and ask each one alone. The second answer is not the first. Getting in requires graduating the academy, a field training program, and a probation period that can run 2 years. A fair number do not finish probation and rarely over courage. You can be released during that window for almost any reason, and after it, you almost cannot be. Here is what nobody tells you. Everything you earn for the next 30 years is decided by the contract signed above your head, not by anything you do in this car. The next raise is not a promotion. It is a birthday. The senior police officer earns $53.49 an hour, roughly $111,252 a year. Most of them are 28 to 40. You are the one the young ones ask. You know which addresses have a dog, which have a back door onto an alley, and which sergeant will back a discretionary call. You have not been promoted once, and your pay has nearly doubled. Around year 7, you are first on a call you have run 100 times, and it is not that call. You stand in a doorway 4 seconds deciding, and afterwards you cannot account for those seconds to anyone. Getting here requires time and grade, a clean disciplinary file, and staying on the street. A meaningful share transfer to a quieter assignment about here. The reason given is almost never danger. It is what a rotating shift does to a household. Here is what nobody tells you. On a step schedule, your pay rises on a date, not on a review. 11 steps, 1 per anniversary, and nobody has to think about you at all. The step chart runs out before the career does. The top step police officer earns $63.26 an hour, roughly $131,592 a year. Most of them are 40 to 55. You are at the last step of the patrol scale. You train the recruits, you take the calls that need somebody who will not escalate, and you watch people 15 years younger pin on stripes. At some point, you are handed a scene and told to hold it, and a supervisor you trained arrives and takes it. He is right to. That is how it works. It does not feel like it. Getting here requires roughly 3 decades of service and a schedule that never let go. A number go before this step. 22 years is a full pension in some systems, and a person who can leave at 45 often does. Here is what nobody tells you. This is the highest paid rung that involves no supervision of anybody. Everything above it is a different job wearing the same uniform. The next rung is not above you on the chart. It is beside it. Here is the part that confuses everyone outside the job. In New York City, the administrative code says the commissioner may designate a limited number of police officers as detectives of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. Designate, not promote. A member detailed to the Detective Bureau retains rank in the force. There is no competitive civil service examination for it, the way there is for sergeant. The same code says that if someone is temporarily assigned to a detective's duties longer than 18 months, the department has to appoint them and pay the detective rate. Chicago is arranged differently and lists detective as its own pay grade above police officer. Both produce the same strange result. A detective can be paid more than a sergeant's starting rate and still take orders from that sergeant, because the pay grade and the rank are 2 systems that happen to share a building. The detective earns $68.44 an hour, roughly $142,350 a year. Most of them are 32 to 55. You carry cases now instead of calls, and a phone that rings for 3 years after a file closes. Nobody dispatches you anywhere. You decide what to work today, which is freedom until you understand nothing gets worked unless you work it. Your first year, you sit on a lead for 11 days because the paperwork is worse than the lead is good. When you go, the address is empty, and a neighbor says the person moved out last week. Getting in requires an assignment, a supervisor who recommends you, and in most places, no examination at all. A steady stream go back to patrol, almost never over the work. The cases follow you home in a way a radio call never did. Here is what nobody tells you. Because it is an assignment and not a rank, it can be taken back. A commander can put you in a car without a hearing, and the pay grade goes with the job. The only ladder that cannot be taken from you is the one with an examination at the bottom of it. Here is the money mechanism, and it is not the hourly rate. It is which 3 years count. In the New York City police pension system, pensionable earnings are not just base salary. The plan document lists base salary, overtime, night differential, holiday pay, worked vacation, portal to portal, and allowable longevity. The pension is calculated off a final average salary, defined as the average wage over any 3 consecutive years that gives the highest figure. That definition changes how the last decade of a career is worked, because a year of heavy overtime near the end does not pay you once. It pays you every month for the rest of your life. The system knows, the same document caps it, if the wages in any year inside that average exceed the average of the prior 2 by more than 10%, the excess is thrown out. 22 years of service gets 50% of that final average salary, reduced later by half of a Social Security benefit. That one calculation explains more about who volunteers for what in year 19 than any conversation about rank ever will. On the 24th of May, 2022, a gunman entered Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, and killed 19 children and 2 teachers. 376 law enforcement officers responded, from local, state, and federal agencies. 77 minutes passed between officers arriving and the gunman being confronted and killed. A Texas House investigative committee reported that the response showed systemic failures and egregiously poor decision-making and lacked any clear leadership. The Federal Review, published in January of 2024, found cascading failures and no urgency in setting up a command post, and italicized its central finding: an active shooter with access to victims should never be treated as a barricaded subject. The school district police chief, who under his own district's plan should have been the incident commander, left his radios outside and told officers not to enter. Nobody in that hallway was confused about their training. They were confused about who was in charge. The patrol sergeant earns $75.27 an hour, roughly $156,564 a year. Most of them are 35 to 55. You have a squad now. You approve reports, you go to the calls that end up on a screen somewhere, and you answer for 8 people you did not choose. Your first month, you back a probationary officer's call in front of a complainant, then take him apart in the parking lot. Both halves are the job, and nobody teaches the order they go in. Getting here requires a competitive civil service examination, time and grade, and a promotional list that may not move. Most who sit the examination are never promoted from the list, and rarely over the score. A list that expires before it reaches your number is the same as failing. Here is what nobody tells you. The examination is why this rung cannot be taken from you. You tested for it, so it is property, in a way a detective's designation is not. There is a rung that is not on either ladder. In 2023, one Boston police lieutenant was paid $426,000, of which $221,000 was overtime, on a base of $146,000. That year, the department spent $88.5 million on overtime against a budget of $44 million, and nearly 100 officers each earned more than $100,000 in overtime alone. None of them were promoted to get there. They were available, and availability is the only qualification on that ladder. Police recruit, $30.59 an hour in a classroom. Probationary officer, $43.66. 2 years you can be released in. Senior officer, $53.49, the one the young ones ask. Top step officer, $63.26, the end of the chart. Detective, $68.44, an assignment that can be taken back. Patrol sergeant, $75.27, the first rank named in a lawsuit. 20 years and no stripes is not a failure in this job. It is one of 2 ways up. What Uvalde put on the record is what the trade already knew. The ladder that decides who gives the order and the ladder that decides who gets paid are not the same ladder, and on the worst day of your life, you find out which one the building actually runs on. Next, every level of an electrician,